Hello and welcome along to the Panto podcast. Well, this is it, the end of the series. Can I just say a huge thank you to everybody who's liked, who's shared, and all those people as well who've really helped me able to get some absolutely fantastic guests. I'm actually recording this on the morning of the 15th of May 2020, a few minutes before I'm actually going to publish the episode because I did not know what was going to go on in the world. The podcast will be back as soon as social distancing has finished, collecting more stories from great people, performers, creatives, and I've already got a whole list of people who've already agreed to be on. Don't worry, I'll be back at some time in the very near future. I just wanted to say thank you so much for all your kind and lovely feedback that I get. It really is an absolute pleasure to be able to collect these stories and to be able to broadcast them all over the world. We've now reached 118 countries, and as we currently stand, we're looking at 340,000 downloads globally. So for the next series, if there's anybody you'd love to be on, why not actually ask them? If you know them, just say to them, have you thought about being on the Panto podcast? It'd be a lovely thing to get your friends on and people you really admire in the industry. Don't forget as well, there's a Facebook page, there's a Twitter page, there's an Instagram page, there's the YouTube channel, there's everything as well. All the previous episodes are available to listen for free. And I would just love to say as well, thank you to everybody who shared their story for free and creating this absolutely astonishing body of work that I can share with you, the listener. So thank you for listening. But on to this week's episode. And I have got somebody who is celebrating 50 years in the business. The legendary pantomime dame, comedy historian and radio presenter, the very cheeky Paul Harris is my guest for this episode. We talk about his famous book that should be gracing your shelves at home, the feedback he was given by his science teacher at an after-dinner speech, and why you should never ever ask Paul for help with a chandelier. So, for the last time this series, sit back and enjoy the latest Panto podcast. My guest for today's Panto podcast is, well, how can I best describe you really? Writer, dame, performer, comic?
Pratt.
Well, you said it. Mr. Paul Harris, hello there, sir. How are you?
Hello, it's lovely to see you, Hayden.
Oh, so did you come then from a theatrical family?
No, good Lord, no. I sort of fell into the business. When I left school, I was brought up in Rochester, down here in Kent, and I was in Chatham Dockyard at the age of 15 as a shipwright apprentice. And after doing about 18 months of a 5-year apprenticeship, I realised I was useless and hated it. And thought, what can I do? What can I do? And my first thought was, I'll be a journalist. And then I thought, well, you can't spell, you can't do that. So then I thought, well, I know what I'll do. I'll be a singer. And then I realised I couldn't sing. So that had to go out. And I remember thinking to myself, walking around Chatham Dockyard as a 16, 17-year-old, well, if I can't be a singer, I'll have to be a comedian. And that was it. And I have this theory that your brain can work without any conscious input from you. It does it anyway. You know, you go to bed thinking about a problem, you don't know how to solve it, and you wake up and the solution jumps into your head. Your brain has been working on that solution overnight. Well, mine must have done it, because I was stood in Chatham High Street one day at a bus stop, and a bus came along and had a notice, an advert on it that said, Alan Gale presents Little Red Riding Hood at the Opera House, Tunbridge Wells. Now, this was about March, so it was long gone, the Panto. And I thought, oh, I suppose that man, that Alan Gale, lives in the Opera House at Tunbridge Wells. That's how green I was. So I wrote him a letter. They obviously passed it on to him. And he wrote back and said, well, you've no experience and it's far too early to be cast in a panto, so no, I can't help you. So about 3 months later, I don't know why, it suddenly jumped into my head, write to him again. So I wrote him again, and I didn't get a reply. But I got a reply from a man called Edwin Hicks. He'd obviously passed on my letter, saying, I understand you want to go into the business. Phone me up and we'll arrange to meet. And I went to his house in Blackheath. He said, come for an audition. Well, I didn't know what an audition was. I had no idea. Never done anything on the stage. But I was so naive, it didn't worry me. I just went up there. Luckily, it wasn't an audition, it was a chat, it was an interview. And I came home having secured a part of Captain's Mate in Sinbad the Sailor at the Palace Theatre, Plymouth. That was my start. That was 1960-61. Long, long time ago. And that was the start of me in the business. It automatically sort of pushed me into show business.
And what was it like then, that first time in pantomime?
I wasn't worried about anything because I was so naive, I didn't know anything. But luckily I had good pros around me. The man playing the captain to my mate, he was a well-established pro and sort of dragged me along with him. And I thoroughly enjoyed it, absolutely enjoyed it. Came home to being out of work, of course. I didn't have an act or anything like that. And my mother made me get a proper job. And I kept answering adverts in the stage newspaper and eventually fixed a panto for the following Christmas, which was a dreadful tour of Cinderella at Morecambe, Barrow-in-Furness and Whitby. So I did that, and that was the start. Then I managed to get a job as a bluecoat Pontins at Blackpool. And that was really the start of work in summer seasons and pantos. And eventually I got an act and went into clubs and cabaret and music hall and everything else. And here I am, having done it for all those years.
How many years has it been now?
About 59 years.
59 years.
I'm 320 years old now, yes. So, and I did panto more or less every year. There's been the odd year when I haven't fixed, but I played Buttons and Idle Jack and Simple Simon and Broker's Man, all those sort of things. And then in 1973, I played my first Dame. That was again in Plymouth, but at the Hoe Theatre. There was a little theatre on the Hoe there. So I played Dame in Babes in the Wood there, and played Dame ever since, until about 3 years ago when I decided my Daming days are possibly over. But never say no, because the phone might ring in a minute.
What was it like then, that sort of transition to Dame?
Most strange. I can remember the feeling to this day of playing Dame in Babes in the Wood. It just felt wrong. I wasn't comfortable. I'd wanted to play Dame for a long time, but I just didn't feel comfortable. But I suppose it was just getting used to the part. After that, it was fine, and I gradually got all my own little bits and pieces that I used to put in panto every year, and got my own costumes and so on, and you gradually build it.
Where did you learn your mannerisms from then?
I think most of them sort of came naturally, but a management that I worked for a long time, a man called Jerry Jerome, he did pantos and summer seasons and the like. He said to me, get some little bits, he said 2 or 3 minutes of things that you do. So when you go into panto, you can say, well, I've got my undressing if you want it, and I've got my swinging on a chandelier gag if you want it. He said, because they will then become polished. You'll do them every year, and you've got these little inserts that are polished. You can just put them in, and it gives you if there's not much for you in the script, if you've agreed to do those 2 or 3 bits, you'll be remembered.
Was that always quite handy then, when looking for work?
I think it was originally, because people would know that I did this swinging on the chandelier gag for many years. And certain managements got to know, oh, yes, he does that one. It's a very strange gag. I can tell you a story about that. I was doing panto with a 60s rock band called the Rockin' Berries. And 2 of them were playing captain and mate, and the rest were the crew in Dick Whittington. And this gag I did, in the shop scene, we said, oh, there's a light out in the chandelier. I'll change the bulb. So I would get a chair, put it on top of a table, balance on the chair, 1 foot on the seat, 1 foot on the back, and tip the chair. I knew how to balance that chair as I tried to grab the chandelier. Eventually, I would grab it and the chair would fall and I would swing across the stage. And the people on stage with me would grab me to pull me down and pull my skirt off. Then there was a blackout. Nice gag. Doing it with the Rockin' Berries, one Saturday matinee, they swore accidentally, but I don't know. They managed to get their hands, when they went to grab me, they got their hands in the waistband of the skirt, the tights, my knickers, the lot, and pulled the lot down. And Harris is swinging on a chandelier, naked from the waist down. And that was the night the electrician was late with the blackout. And luckily, I had my back to the audience and I hung there because nothing I could do. I couldn't even drop off the chandelier onto the floor because all the clothes were around my ankles. And I just hung there thinking, please don't let me turn round. Don't let me turn round. I mean, it's one thing, the audience screamed, of course, at seeing the dame's bum, but I don't think they'd have liked it so much if I'd turned round. So that was the chandelier gag.
Did you tell the boys off afterwards?
They swore it was an accident. I said, how strange that should happen accidentally when the electrician is late with the blackout. No, they'd fixed it up. But we had great times. They were great guys to be working with.
You must have worked with some absolutely fabulous people over the years.
When I first started in the business, my first summer season was in Music Hall at Margate for a lovely man called Ted Gatty. And he said to me, watch everyone, even the bad acts, watch them, because that will teach you what not to do. The good acts will teach you what to do and pick up things. And I did that, and that's why I've loved working with people. I love working with pros that have been in the business for years that can teach you things, and you watch little things. And I remember watching Ethel Merman, great American artist. They would play her entrance music. When she was in Variety, they'd play her entrance music and she'd be a second or so late coming on. And that worked beautifully because the audience went, oh, here she is. It built the atmosphere. And I learnt lots of little tricks like that from wonderful people. So I'm very, very grateful. I did Panto for a couple of years with Clive Dunn. From Dad's Army, you remember. He was wonderful. He was such a good pro. And to watch that man work an audience was an education. And another one I worked with for 3 years over in Belfast at the Opera House was Frank Carson. And Frank really, really knew how to work an audience and was also a good writer, by the way. I don't think he ever wrote any of his own gags, but he wrote parodies of songs and things that he used in Panto. And it was an education to see him work in that audience, especially in Belfast, where he was known and loved, of course. So 3 years with him.
There's always been a love with variety I'm getting from yourself. Did you go to many shows when you were little?
No, never. The only shows we went to, as I say, I was brought up in Rochester. We went to see the Panto at Chatham Empire every year with Mum and Dad. And I remember some of the stars I saw then, long forgotten. Do you know, I saw Jimmy Young play Prince Charming in Cinderella there. That must have been a week or two back. And I saw Arthur English in Panto, and I saw a very, very young Des O'Connor. He must have been about 20, playing Wishy Washy, I think it was. So that was the only time I went to the theatre. I never saw a summer show until I was in one. So it all sort of happened accidentally in my career. Do you know, I've been in the business 59 years. In all that 59 years, I've done about 5 auditions, none of which I got the part. I've never got a part from an audition. How have I worked and paid the mortgage? And I've done very well, thank you. But all done without auditioning. Must be my brain working overtime.
Must be.
Yeah. Dear, dear. But it's been a great business.
Over those years, though, with Christmas, obviously a busy time, you're away from home and things like that. Was it difficult sometimes?
Yes, very difficult. When you've been in awful digs. I remember once being in a hotel and they said it was a room with an ensuite. But the thing is, when you were in the toilet, you had to leave the door open because it was so small. You couldn't get in. And it was dreadful. I was in this hotel. That's the sort of thing I hated. I couldn't wait to get to the theatre and get warm and get a shower, you know. So, yes, it can be difficult. And sometimes you would have a long, long journey just to get home for Christmas. And then Christmas Day, you'd worry yourself sick in case it snowed in the night and you had to get back to Manchester for the matinee the next day. But you did it, you know. I remember I did Stockport, and we used to do 3 shows on a Saturday, and then I would drive home to Kent just to have Sunday at home and then drive back Monday morning for the matinee. There was a lot of driving. I wouldn't do it now.
You've always been a Kent boy.
Yes.
You ended up on Radio Kent as well.
Yes, I hosted a show on BBC Kent for 13 years. That was great fun. That was really good. And I loved that. And even when I went away to Panto, I would phone in something. You know, we'd go live on air and chat to the rest of the Panto cast and so on. So, yes, I enjoyed radio. And I've written and presented for BBC Kent, also for Radio 4 and Radio 2 and various other programmes over the years. I do enjoy radio, but it's not the same buzz as having a live audience there. That is really nice to walk on in a gorgeous theatre like the Grand Opera House of Belfast, to walk on to a full house and do your thing and hear the reaction and feel the atmosphere. It's a lovely, lovely feeling. It sort of gets into your bones, really, doesn't it?
Is it like a drug, would you say?
Yes, it probably is. It probably is now. You get so used to it, and theatre people think differently to other people, you know.
I've noticed that, yeah.
Yeah, we do, because I have friends in the business. It's strange that maybe we worked with 40 years ago. Lovely lady I worked with many, many moons ago, 30 years ago, Leah Bell, who I know you know. She came to see me at Whitley Bay a few years ago. I was doing Dame there. And she came in to see me, and it was just as if we'd met the week before instead of 30 years before. You know, you pick up from where you left off, which I don't think probably happens if you work in an office or a factory or something.
No, you all seem to share this incredible bond, especially spending Christmases together.
Yes, you're all in the same boat. You turn up, you've got a week or 2 weeks to learn the whole show, so it's hard work. But you're all in the same boat together, and you're all in digs somewhere. So yes, you're all the same.
And when you were in Pantomime with Leah, was that in Newcastle?
Yeah, I did Newcastle Theatre Royal with Leah. I also did the Devonport Theatre Stockport with Leah, with the aforementioned Rockin' Berries and Cannonball were in that show as well. And at the Theatre Royal in Newcastle, it was David Jason played Buttons, and there was a great comic, he's gone now, bless him, a Geordie comic, Bobby Thompson, who was fabulous. Originally, he was in the business, the variety business, touring the halls, but then decided to stay local in Geordie land, and he became a big name in his own area, and a very wealthy man. He would turn up at the theatre in his Rolls Royce. I think he had a little terraced house in Whitley Bay, from what I'm told. But a very sweet man. I never understood a word he said in his act because his accent was so thick. But he certainly packed that theatre for about 12 weeks. So great comic.
What was it like then, working with different ensembles over the years? Have there been bad times over the years where you've not enjoyed a pantomime?
Sure, gosh, have I not enjoyed? No, sometimes perhaps you didn't enjoy the digs you were in, or maybe there was a person in the cast you didn't get on with. But generally, no, I just loved Panto. Sometimes you might not. Perhaps the producer says he wants you to do this gag or doesn't want you to do that gag, and that might upset you a bit, but you get on with it. I don't think I've ever had any trouble. You hear stories about names that are difficult and so on. I don't think I've ever had any trouble with names when I've worked. I've always found them fine. Usually got on okay with everybody. But as I say, it's other things. Maybe the dressing room's cold or the digs are rotten or something like that. They're the problems.
OK, then. Favourite theatres that you've played? You mentioned Grand Opera House, Belfast.
Well, Opera House Belfast was absolutely wonderful. I did 3 consecutive pantos there. I originally went there in 1970 when it was the old Opera House. It was an Isolde cinema. And falling down, dreadful state of the place. But I did Panto then, of course, the Troubles in Ireland only started some months before. That was pretty difficult. And I did Panto there. And then 10 years later, the theatre then closed because the hotel next door, the Europa, was bombed. It's the most bombed hotel in Ireland, I'm told. So the theatre closed. But then they spent something like 3 or 4 million bringing it back to its former glory. It's a beautiful Matcham theatre. And I was lucky enough to do the first 3 pantos there with Frank Carson. And they were wonderful. I found the people in Northern Ireland were wonderful. The theatre was marvellous. And I love theatres like that. The King's at Southsea was a similar one. Again, I think that was a Matcham theatre, Frank Matcham theatre. That was nice working there. The Royal at Newcastle was rather nice. Sometimes you work in a modern theatre and it works. A lot of people, unless it's all wonderful plaster work and red and gold, don't like the theatres. But some of them, like the Cliffs Pavilion at Southend, I did Panto there one year, and that's a reasonably modern theatre. And that works, that's a good atmosphere.
Any theatres you've not liked playing?
Let me think. What have I not liked playing? I didn't like playing Whitby because it was winter. You're too young to remember, it was a dreadful winter of 1963 when we were up to our necks in snow until Easter. Terrible time. And I'm in Whitby halfway down a cliff. Luckily, it was part of a tour and I was only there for a week. And then at the end of the week, I couldn't get home because in those days I was very young and I didn't drive. And of course, all the trains had stopped because of the snow. Luckily, I managed to I think it was the MD gave me a lift into Manchester when I managed to get a train home. And then by the time we got home, the station that I needed in London, Victoria Station, was closed, locked, bolted and barred. And I had to spend the night on the streets.
Oh, goodness.
Not the first time, many people would say, but that's another story.
Would you say then your affection has been more for Dame than anything else?
Yes, I loved playing Dame. It's hard work because I usually have 12 or 14 costume changes. So when you're not on stage, you're changing costume. Whereas perhaps Buttons sitting in his dressing room reading the paper till his next entrance, well, I'm madly changing. So yes, it's hard work. But yes, I did enjoy it. The reason I wanted to play Dame was because quite often I was playing a broker's man or captain's mate or something, and there wasn't much to do in the show, and I wanted a bigger part. But I realised that the comedian in the bigger shows would be a name, so I wouldn't get the chance of playing that. So I thought the next biggest part would be Dame. So that's why I went into it.
Why do you think then Dame is such an important part in pantomime?
I think it's a throwback, isn't it? You see, the Dame started when it was illegal for women to go on the stage. For 200 years, women could not go on the stage. So all female roles had to be played by men or boys. Now, if you were doing, say, Romeo and Juliet, I believe Juliet's meant to be about 12 or 14 years old in the script. So you get a young prepubescent boy, put him in a wig and a frock, and he'll get away with it. The older female roles had to be played by older men. It was more difficult to get away with, of course. So they would tend to play them for comedy a little bit, even though they weren't written for comedy. And that's where the tradition of dame really started. Eventually, I think it was it Charles II who stopped it, allowed women back on the stage. I think it was him. But the dame thing carried on, and men carried on playing this female role in the panto. So it became one of the great comedy roles, particularly these days when quite often the star of the show, whereas it always was a comedian, these days it's just likely to be a pop singer or a newsreader or a weatherman or a reality star or something. So if you're a variety artist or light entertainment artist playing dame, you've got to carry the comedy.
You've certainly studied over the years as well. We'll go into the book, actually.
Oh, the Panto book.
The Panto book.
Yes.
You wrote this wonderful collection of scripts and details of sketches.
Yeah.
Could be lost.
Yeah, well, that's why I wrote it. This was in 1996. I had every year you got together when you're perhaps a script conference for Panto and you said, what gags are we going to do? Let's do the pheasant gag, or let's do the not here gag, or let's do the so-and-so. And everybody's got a different version of it because it's passed down through word of mouth. So it gets changed, a bit like Chinese whispers, you know. And eventually these things are forgotten. So I thought, well, write them down together with some anecdotes of my time in various pantos. And I wrote it down, and my publisher, Peter Owen, took it up. And we all thought it would, well, you know, it's a limited market. You know, a lot of people wouldn't want to buy a book about Panto. And here we are, 24 years later, it's still selling. It still sells a few. It became known as the Bible of Panto. And I've had so many producers and comics and so on say, oh, I've got a copy of your book. And they use it. It's easy to reference what gags you want to do in Panto. So it's still around. Available on Amazon, $12.95.
Well, can I just say, for a start off, thank you for doing that, because there are bits in it as well I've never heard of.
Yes. Oh. And
so some of these routines I've never seen, never heard of before. How did you start then, sort of getting all the bits and pieces together?
Well, by 1996, I had been in the business 35 years. So, of course, I'd done a lot of these gags. And, of course, in those early days, you're working with old comics that are long gone now, but they knew all these gags from years back. And so I just sat down and started thinking about it. Once I got the idea, I then had to think about what gags are there. And there are different versions of gags. I think from memory, in the book, there's 3 different versions of the ghost gag. In case people say, oh, we're bored with doing it that way, let's do it another way. I think there's about 2 or 3 kitchen scenes that are in there, different kitchen scenes and that. The ones I heard, or occasionally when people knew I was writing the book would come and say, oh, you must put the such and such a gag in. And they would tell me it if it was one I didn't know. And in it would go. So it works very well. I must read it sometime.
What are your favourites then?
Oh, I like the money gags that actually, unless you think too hard, they seem to work. There's a lovely gag about owing somebody money, where you want to borrow £2 off of the musical director, and he said, well, I've only got £1. I'll lend you £1. And the next one comes on and they say, you owe me £2. Oh, well, I've only got £1. I'll give you £1. I'll owe you £1. And this goes round and round the cast. And when it comes back, it all works out. And you think, how did that work? But they do seem to work. There's another one, the £15 gag, that actually seems to work, where you get conned out of £15. And I like them. Money gags are good.
Well, everybody likes the money, don't they? Has the money gone up over the years?
Certain ones you have to change. Like you used to be able to say, look, I'll lend you a £1 note. Well, nobody knows what a £1 note is these days. So, of course, that has to change, doesn't it?
Yes. No, I meant in the business. Did the money steadily increase as you...
Oh, yes. I mean, it's usually up to one's agent, isn't it? But yes, I can't complain. I can't complain. I just think that certain things happen. I always felt sorry in the old days for a lot of the dancers, because the equity minimum would go up and the dancers would be on equity minimum, whatever it was at the time. So you had 8 dancers in and the equity minimum would go up, so the following year you'd have 6 dancers in. And I've had dancers actually say to me, we know we want as much money as we can get, we want a good salary, but we know that 2 of us will be out of work next year if they put it up again. So it's a difficult thing, isn't it?
Is it quite a difficult business then when you're actually in it, not knowing what the next gig's going to be?
Oh, yes. I mean, I was lucky because there were a lot of summer seasons around. So I would do a 20-week summer season and then a 10-week panto. Well, that's over half a year gone. You know, you've only got the spring and the autumn to worry about. And when I was around, there was lots of cabaret clubs and working men's clubs and all bits and pieces that you could do in the spring and the autumn. I did summer seasons in Blackpool, Margate, 6 in Margate, 4 in Newquay down in Cornwall. I've done Yarmouth and Blackpool and Ilfracombe and Torquay, and all over the place. Well, that was good. Nowadays, there aren't the summer seasons anymore. So I don't know what people do. It must be very difficult for certain artists these days. I'm glad I'm not 18 and just starting in the business again.
What would be your advice for an 18-year-old starting in the business?
Well, first of all, I learned an awful lot by being a bluecoat for Pontins. I just did the 1 season at Squires Gate in Blackpool, and that taught me a heck of a lot. So I would advise anybody starting in the business to get a season in a holiday camp for Warners or Butlins or whatever, because it will teach you. It'll teach you how to talk to people. We used to have to do really dreadful things. You know, so I remember once that it's pouring with rain and there's sort of 300 or 400 people trying to get into the dining room for their lunch, and lunch is late. And they're all in the foyer of the dining room, and the boss says, get up on that table, entertain them. It's going to be 15 minutes late. And you have to stand up on a table and keep all those people happy until the chef decides lunch is ready.
How did you entertain them for 15 minutes?
I have absolutely no idea. But you have to do it. You have to and you have to have a smile on your face all the time, you know. You've got a hangover and you learn things. When I was at Blackpool, the children's entertainer, after about 3 or 4 weeks of the season, left or was sacked. I don't really know what happened. And the entertainment manager came to me and said, you're the children's entertainer. I said, I hate kids. He said, look, here's some money. There was a magic shop in Blackpool run by a man called Murray, who was a famous magician. He said, here's a £5. Go and buy some magic tricks and move into the children's theatre. They had a separate theatre for the children. He said, there's 2 rooms at the back that used to be the dressing rooms. That's your little flat. So you move out of the chalet, you live in there, and you entertain the children. I thought, what the heck am I going to do? Because these kids would turn up at 10 in the morning after breakfast, and you've got them till lunchtime, and then you've got them in the afternoon. So you had to learn how to do it. And I used to do things, if I wasn't feeling too good, I'd had a few glasses of wine the night before, you would give them all a piece of paper And you would say, now go round the camp and get as many different autographs as you can get on that one bit of paper. And the one with the most autographs on it will win a prize. Come back at 12 o'clock. Then I could go back to bed. So, yeah, we used to do that. And then one day, one of the kitchen porters who I knew came up to me and he said, are you going out tonight? Because I didn't have to do ballroom duty. Most bluecoats had to go in the ballroom. But I didn't. When the children finished at 8 o'clock, the children's entertainment, I was free. So I said, yes, I'm going into Blackpool, you know. He said, well, we all share chalets. And he said, I'm with this girl. And would you mind if I brought her to your little flat at the back there, you know, to be on my own? And I said, no, all right, then that's okay. He said, but be out by 11 o'clock because I'll be home then. So he did this, and I saw him the next morning, and he was very kind, and he slipped me a couple of bob, you see. He said, thank you very much. I said, oh, that's very kind of you, thank you. And a few days later, somebody else came up and said, I was talking to John, and he said, you let him bring his girlfriend. And this started off, and, well, it was about a month before I realised I was probably running a brothel in the children's theatre. I better stop this. I'll end up in the papers for the wrong reason.
It all sounds very hidey-high.
It was terribly hidey-high. I absolutely adored it. I got very homesick. That was my first summer season. And I got very homesick in the middle. But once you get over that, it was fine. One season was enough. I managed the following year to get music hall, where I stayed for 6 seasons down at Margate. So that got me into the business sort of properly. But the holiday camp was invaluable. Anybody starting the business should go to one for a season.
Have you ever thought about producing your own pantomimes?
Yes, I did. I produced a panto at the Theatre Royal Margate one year, at the Fernham Hall in Fareham, along with David Lee, for a couple of years. And when Jerry Jerome, who I used to work for, died, his wife asked me to go in with her. They had Leeds City Varieties. So I went in with her and put the pantos in at City Varieties for about 9 years. Bobby Pett, Jerry Jerome's wife, sadly died about less than 2 years after Jerry. So I then had the whole company, and put the pantos up there. I have to say I didn't enjoy it. The City Varieties was a wonderful theatre. I didn't play it. I put the show in and booked a director and booked a cast and everything. But I also had trouble with their stage manager there, who was a great, great character. He'd been there since ever. But he would never use the scenery you sent up because he couldn't be bothered. So you'd send up all the scenery, and when you looked at the show, went to the dress rehearsal, he would be using the cloths, the back cloths that were in the good old days, the BBC television series, which were all kept there. So you'd have a ballroom scene with just one back cloth. And I'd say, where's my scenery? Oh, no, the pulleys are broken. We can't use it. And I used to get so annoyed. And I went to the men that ran the theatre, the two brothers, Stanley and Michael Joseph, and I said to them, this is ridiculous. I send up all this scenery and he won't use it. And their answer was, have you ever heard of anybody walking out of a show because they didn't like the scenery? So they backed him.
Goodness.
So, although I have to say I did well, and always came out on the right side, having made a profit. But no, producing wasn't for me. I loved writing, I loved directing, but no, I won't produce anymore.
How did you direct to bring the best out of people?
Well, you have to get to know what they're good at. I know a certain comedian, he better be nameless because it's not fair to name him, but there is a certain comedian who's brilliant at patter comedy, at verbal gags, but is no good at visual gags. Now, once you know that, you know what to write for him. You think, well, it's no good writing him something that's very physical, maybe the cod ballet or one of these things that's all physical, because I know he's not at his best. But he's brilliant at doing verbal gags, so give him lots of verbal gags to do. So that's how you do it, by getting to know the artists.
How do you do that then, when you had all these productions going on?
Well, a lot of the time you're booking people who you know or whose reputation you know. They might not have worked for you before, but you will have seen them or you will know what they're like. I mean, if, for example, to take an obvious example, if you were to book Charlie Drake, you know darn well he's very good at slapstick, don't you? Even though he may not never have worked with you before. So you know what sort of stuff to give them. And a lot of the time with comics, they will ask for certain things. They say, look, can we do the such and such a gag, or can we do this? And so you know that they would be okay with that gag.
That must be quite the gift then, when it comes down to writing, to have people who are of that skill set. When you've got people from reality TV and new people coming in, and you don't know their strengths, that must create some problems.
That is difficult. You've got the two ways, you see. You've either got to book actors that will do the script as you've written it, exactly as you've written it, and as you are going, or somebody's going to direct it, or you're writing for that person or for those people. So there's the two different ways. And if I was to write for something, I mean, I've written for lots and lots of pantos over the years, and if I knew that Frank Carson was going to be in it, well, you don't write for Frank. You just say, go on here, Frank. And they will carry on from there. But yeah, you get to know. You learn by what to do. Sometimes you write something for somebody who you don't know, and when you first see them rehearsing it, you think, oh gosh, this isn't going to work. He can't do that. I'll alter that. I'll change that. And therefore you do, to get the best out of your artists.
So do you go and see many pantomimes now?
No, not a lot. I don't get a lot. I concentrate on writing. I published 2 books last year, and I'm 40,000 words into the third one. So I do spend a lot of time at home now writing. I did go to see Dartford, the what was it, Peter Pan? I saw that. So I usually see 1 or 2, but I only managed to see 1 this year.
What have been your favourites to watch over the years that you haven't been part of?
The best one was I'm guessing 15 years ago, Ronnie Corbett playing Mother Goose at the Churchill Theatre in Bromley. That was brilliant. A wonderful panto. Patton Brothers were in it, of course. It was a wonderful, wonderful panto. He was so good as Dame. I think it's the only time he's played Dame in panto. But he was excellent, very, very good. So, yes, I loved that one. And I used to love the last one I saw at the Marlow at Canterbury. They're always good productions down there. Didn't get to see it this year, but I used to go and see it quite a lot. I loved it when dear old Dave Lee was in it. He's not around anymore, bless him. But he was so funny, very funny comic.
Dave was a different kind of dame as well.
Well, he used to say, I'm just a fat bloke in a frock. That's how he described himself.
But there are so many takes on the dame.
Yes.
By different people.
I love traditional dames. There is a place, of course, for drag dames, but I prefer the traditional ones. You see, where it came about, we've had panto since 1700s, not as we would recognise it, but in the 1850s, 1860s, there was a man called Augustus Harris running the Theatre Royal in Drury Lane, and he did his panto, the sort of panto we wouldn't recognise as such, and he saw this new form of entertainment that was going mad and packing theatres all over London. That was, of course, music hall, which started in the 1850s. And he thought, how can I get that audience, all packing those places, into my theatre? And he had the idea of mixing the music hall artists with his singers and actors. And that was what made Panto the biggest thing ever, when he started taking people like Dan Leno, Mari Lloyd, Herbert Campbell and so on, and putting them into his pantos. Panto became long runs, up to Easter sometimes, not 3 or 4 weeks like today. There were special pantomime trains going all over the country taking people to see their favourite artists. And that was the magic ingredient for Panto, was mixing variety artists and actors and singers. And that stayed as such until the 50s. 1950s, when rock and roll came in, late 50s, and then some of the rock and roll singers decided they wanted to go into Panto. So then we had your Mark Winters, your Tommy Steeles, your Cliff Richards and so on, all going into Panto. Up to then, it would have been a woman playing the principal boy, of course. But then you get your Tommy Steele or your Mark Winter, they would play principal boy. So that changed a bit. Latterly, of course, you then got certain women playing dame. It's still mainly a male thing, but you do get a few women now playing dame. But originally, of course, they wouldn't have played it because it's what's known as low comedy. Fall on your bum comedy, lose your drawers comedy, which wasn't nice for a woman until the last few years. Now anything goes.
How do you think Panto's going to evolve in the future?
It always changes, and since Victorian times, people say, oh, it's on the way out, and it's not gone yet. So it'll always be around. It's handled these days by the biggest producer, which is Kudos, who do, I believe, about 30 or 40 different pantos. So really, if they change something, then I think most other people will eventually follow suit. So how it evolves is really up to a management like them, I suppose. Whether we like the way it evolves or not is neither here nor there. Because if they change something and they don't do the business, they'll soon change it back again, because the whole idea of the game is to do business.
It's a shame, isn't it, that money and profits are such a big thing when it comes to this wonderful art form that brings so much happiness as well.
Yes. I've always thought for many years somebody should start a pantomime preservation society to put on a panto that isn't controlled by the budget, as a panto was in its heyday. Rather like we've got the National Theatre. They don't put on shows for profit. That, please God, they find a profit. They're subsidised, but they like to make a profit if they can. So you can put on a panto that most managers wouldn't put on. For example, panto traditionally always finished the first half with a bit of a ballet routine, and transformation scenes. Well, they don't do them now. Well, if you had a theatre that was every year was going to put on the panto preservation panto, you could put in one that isn't budget-led, because hopefully you'd get subsidised, and put on a wonderful with a girl boy and a male dame and transformations and a ballet scene. I remember working for a management, doing Dick Whittington, and I said, why can't we put the ship scene on a rocker, like a seesaw? So we'd have a splosh scene with the water coming in the porter and the whole thing. He says, very good reason. I need 4 stage hands to work that rocker, 1 on each corner to push it up and down. And he said, that's 4 extra salaries. No, you can't have it on a rocker. So you see, they're all budget-led now. It's a shame, really, isn't it? If nobody had invented money, we'd all be all right.
You mentioned earlier on about your incident with the rocking berries.
Oh, yeah.
But the thing that got me is you mentioned about being on a table, then on a chair that was balancing. I mean, have you ever hurt yourself over the years? I mean, health and safety would have had a nightmare with things like that. Yes,
I did, unfortunately. I was at Loughborough one year. And I did the gag, and the rope holding up the chandelier broke. Luckily, I landed on my feet, and I went to the stage manager and said, that could have been very, very nasty. I said, you must make sure we have a fail-safe there, another wire, a rope, so if the one rope breaks, it'll be held up by the other one. And he said, yes, I will do that. I will do it. And the next couple of performances, it was okay. And then it came to the last Saturday matinee, and it went again. And as I came down, I hit my back on the edge of the table, which was a metal table covered in a tablecloth. And I lay on the floor. I thought I broke my back. I couldn't move. I just kept thinking, crawl off. And I couldn't crawl. I was there. And eventually they brought a cloth in, and that was Mike Newman, the Irish comic. He went on and kept things going. I had to lay there until the ambulance came. And to this day, I have a lump on my spine. That was, way back in the 70s. And I spent the afternoon in hospital. And would you believe, they said, no, you haven't broken anything. It's just badly bruised. Off you go. And I couldn't get off the trolley. I just couldn't move. And they helped me up and managed to get in a cab. I was in agony. And I couldn't walk. And luckily, my first entrance in Panto was with a shopping trolley to do some shopping gags. And that night, I had no one to take over the part. They cobbled through the second half of the show in the matinee while I was in hospital. But as it was the last performance, I said I'd go on, but I had to do every entrance pushing this shopping trolley, using it as a Zimmer frame.
Oh, bless you.
And I have to say, I was in agony for 9 months afterwards. But only, they said nothing was broken, but I've got this lump the size of an orange on my spine now that has never gone away. But touch wood, I'm not in pain now.
That's good.
They did give me a bottle of champagne, very kind of them.
Oh, that's compensation, isn't it?
In fairness, the boss said, sue me, Paul, sue me. And I thought, how can I sue him? He's a friend. It didn't enter my head. I was so green. It didn't enter my head to be the insurance companies I was suing. So I didn't sue. I didn't get onto equity. I just put up with it. But there you are. Yes, that's the only time that gag went wrong. I don't do it now. I'm far too ancient now.
Did that sort of put you off doing any sort of slapstick kind of routines after that? No. You do it. You have to do it. You think it gets a laugh. My job is to get laughs. So get on with it. Get the laugh and get off. What's your favourite then for the slosh scenes?
The splosh scenes. Oh, there's a lovely kitchen one where you're making cakes. And, of course, you put the cake on the chair and someone comes and sits on it. And it's wonderful. But when you do a slosh scene, you've got to do it properly. I've seen them where they're using a little bit of shaving foam on a plate. That doesn't work. Do it properly. I did Panto one year, and the tag of the splosh scene was the Chinese policeman falling in the bath of water. And, of course, the crew hated clearing that up, quite rightly. And they would half fill it with water. And I said, no, unless the audience see that water spilling over the top of the bath as he goes in, it won't get the laugh. So I used to insist that the bath was full right up. And that was a lovely, lovely gag.
You don't see many. Well, I don't see many now.
No, they won't do them. They can't be bothered. There is one guy who you mentioned that apparently is brilliant at it. That's Damien Patton.
Yes.
They say he is brilliant at splosh scenes, at making the splosh and doing them, and knows all the gags. So I'm looking forward to seeing him. I nearly got up to Whitley Bay this year to see him, but I didn't manage it. But they say he's brilliant. So there's a young man that will carry on doing splosh for the next 100 years and doing it properly.
Well, he's come from stock, hasn't he?
Yes. They're all relations, aren't they? Yeah?
62 years.
Really?
They were in the business together.
Good Lord. Yes. So, yes, splosh is... I think if you read my Panto book, the second edition, because there were 2 editions, one has some tips for Panto. And one of the ingredients in a Panto is a splosh scene. You know, I think you have certain ingredients. You must have some current songs. You must have some, at least one song that the kids can join in, a silly song. There's usually the song sheet, of course. You must have a male dame or boy and girl must sing a duet. And there's certain things that I think have to go into Panto.
I was going to ask you about what creates that dream mix of pantomime.
Well, you pick out the bits. Unfortunately, these days you are controlled by the names in a lot of pantos because they say, I don't want to do that or I want to do this. And they do have control, quite rightly, because they're putting bums on seats. But in an ideal panto, you have, as I say, a splosh scene and some, oh, yes, it is, oh, no, it isn't. You have your song sheet. You have your ghost gag. These are the ingredients that are tried and tested over the years. So.
The public expect them, don't they, as well?
Of course they do. Look at the gags they make in certain pantos over the ghost gag. I mean, I've seen on Facebook and so on that ghost bench up in Whitley Bay appearing all over town. And the same with the one in the Marlow Theatre at Canterbury. That is famous. If they did a panto down there without the ghost gag, they'd all be lynched.
It's funny, isn't it, how the public as well warm to their local pantomimes.
Yes, they do, don't they? Yes, they like the style of the panto. Now that they've had Evolution presenting the panto at the Marlow, people get to know the type of show they put on, and they like it, or maybe not, who knows. But they like it, and it does good business, so that they're used to that style of show. And if somebody else came in and put a show, they might say, oh, no, it's not the same, you know.
Going back to yourself then as a dame, one thing I found with a lot of dames, and you mentioned about the costumes have all gone, but dames I've always found, working dames, are terrible hoarders. Were you a hoarder of your costumes?
Oh, costumes and props and things that people might ask for that you couldn't walk into the shop and buy. For example, I've still got a stone egg, a hen's egg, because there used to be a gag where you're catching an egg on a plate. Now, I could do that with a real egg. You throw the egg in the air and you catch it on the plate without it breaking. But the gag is that the comic's trying to do it and it smashes egg all over the place. And then you give him the stone egg and, of course, that comes down and smashes the plate and things like this. Well, if I said to you, oh, nip out and buy us a stone egg, you probably couldn't find one. Couldn't get one. So I've got one. So lots of things like that you might need. Might not use them for years, but then all of a sudden somebody asks for one. Yeah, I've got one. The school bell ringing, if you're playing the schoolmistress in certain subjects. I've got a school bell somewhere. Because again, where would you go to buy a school bell in the, I don't know, Barrow in Furness or somewhere? It'd be very difficult. So yes, you hoard things like that. Apart from, of course, from tights and wigs and shoes and bras and necklaces.
How many costumes then did you have at your peak?
Oh, at my peak, not that I use them all every year, but you'd have certain costumes that you only use, like your schoolmistress's mortarboard and cloak and that you would only use in certain subjects. But I suppose I had 25 costumes hanging around, and I'd usually use 12, maybe 14 in a show. But I must have had more than a couple of dozen hanging around, and lots of bits and pieces, of course, you know, lots of odd skirts and knickers and things. And of course, I did an undressing scene, which I had lots and lots of bits for, and that was something that I sort of polished as the years went by, so I could do it. I put a different ending on it. Because quite often they take off all these knickers or petticoats and that's it. But I used to end up in a great corset with a big padlock on the front.
Oh.
And then I would attempt with a big key to get the padlock off, and of course I couldn't get it undone. And I would say, I can't get my corset off, and on would come the comic. I've got something here that'll get it off, and he'd bring on one of those big plunger blow-up things, you know. And he'd put a wire under each foot, and then he'd push the plunger. There'd be a maroon go off and a flash, and the corset would come off, and underneath it I had all burnt undies that would fall down. And that would be the end of the undress. That was a little different trick that I made up over the years and used for many a year. All gone now. Although I still have undies that are all burnt and tattered, but they're my own.
Why then did you give up performing?
I gave up performing. I didn't like being away from home so much. I was put into a panto at the last minute because somebody was ill. And I didn't have my own costumes. They said, don't bother, just get up here, just do it, you see. And I went on, and I didn't feel comfortable in the costumes they gave me. And also I'd put on a bit of weight through being lazy. And I caught sight of myself in a video of the show a few weeks after the panto finished and didn't like what I saw. And I thought, oh, I don't like that. I don't like that. And I didn't want people saying, you know, he used to be quite good years ago. I would hate to be in that. So I thought, right, that's it, Harris. You don't play dame anymore. And so I packed up. And I don't miss it. I hesitate there because it's nice to be home for Christmas, to be sitting here with a glass of wine and watching some dreadful repeat of something on telly, or with friends. I mean, that is nice. But I do miss the chat in the dressing rooms and the camaraderie. And every year I say, oh, I'll nip up and see so-and-so. But then you quite often don't get around to it, you know. Whether I will, I mean, I never say no. The phone could go tomorrow and somebody offer me £1 million or something.
That would be nice.
It would be nice. I'd be there, wouldn't I? Yes.
You need somebody to make the tea.
Yes. But I tell you what it did. Seeing me in that video, which I thought I was pretty bad, I've lost 3 stone in weight.
Oh, congratulations.
And I've got myself fit again. So it frightened me into doing that, into not being such a slob. So maybe I'll be all right as Dame now. I don't know. But I doubt I'll do it.
Do you still do a bit in the mirror?
No, I don't. I toured in a play what I wrote about the life of Frankie Howard. In fact, I did 3 tours of it where I played Frankie Howard. And I do find myself still occasionally, I might be in front of the mirror combing my hair, and I'll find myself saying, oh, no, oh, you look, oh, don't do that. Oh, do you mind? I still find myself falling into his way of speaking, which is not much fun, really, you know. So that's the only thing I do in front of the mirror that I can talk about.
Did you ever get to meet Frankie?
Frankie Howard, yeah, once, briefly. One of my seasons in Margate, I had a flat in a big old house in Cliftonville for the summer. And in one of the other shows was a singer called Lee Young, who I believe now lives in Australia. And he was a very close friend of Frank's. And he had the flat next to me in this same big house. And Frank came down to visit him. And that's when I met Frank. But that's the only time that I've met him. Met his partner, Dennis, because when the show was playing we were at Taunton, Frank had a house 20 miles up the road. And so I went up to see him. And also he phoned me when he heard I was doing the play to sort of give me a few hints and ask me what not to say and so on, you know. Mm. So that was interesting.
You've always loved comedy as well.
Yes. I was the clown, the class clown, because I don't know why. I just was, you know. I always thought I was ignorant. I always thought I was a thicko. And many, many years later, well, about 4 or 5 years ago, I was given an after-dinner talk somewhere. And I said, because I was a right thicko at school, and somebody in the front was looking up at me, and I thought, I know you. Who are you? So I was your science master at school. And I spoke to him after, and I said, well, I used to sit at the back and keep my head down because I was useless. He said, you weren't. You were very intelligent, only you didn't know it. I thought, well, either he's a liar or I still don't know it. So that was interesting, yes.
Do you think it's important, though, to have these nods to the past? You wrote this spectacular book, and we've got these names that some of the younger listeners may not have heard of.
Oh, yes, yes.
I think we need to keep hold of the past still.
Yes, it's history, isn't it? And we like it. I published a book last year called Beyond the Glitter, which takes each chapter is a different type of entertainment. There'd be a chapter on Panto, a chapter on summer season, cruising, holiday camps, radio, television, films, all these different chapters. And in each one is all the scams, the cons, the things that went wrong, the tricks people got up to over the years, over the centuries. And it's selling very well, I must say. It only came out in, I think it was September or August or something. And it's selling very well. And it's got all these different things, but it mentions all the names. There's a section on whatever happened to. And there's all these people that you will have forgotten, but you think, oh, yes, I remember him. What happened to him? And it tells you what happened to them eventually. Some of them all very sad, but some of them funny. A typical story you've no doubt heard of Mariah Martin and Murder in the Old Red Barn, an old melodrama, which was based on fact. You see, in Victorian times, there was this squire, William Corder, Squire Corder, and he was having a fling with some housemaid, Mariah Martin, and he got her pregnant. And when she told him and thought, well, he'll have to marry me now, he murdered her and buried her in the Old Red Barn in a place, I think it was Halstead in Essex it all happened. Well, of course, eventually he was caught and tried, found guilty, and he was hung. Within 24 hours, this had hit all the press, of course, every blooming fairground and carnival in the country was displaying the head of Squire Corder. And they'd all found these heads, probably robbed graves or something, and none of them were Squire Corder, of course, but all these fairgrounds said, this is the head of Squire Corder, and people were paying tuppence to go and see it. They're the sort of scams that went on, you see. And the book is full of things like that. So yes, it's all history, and it all takes you back, and it's important to keep it alive.
Have you, without naming names, but have you ever worked with anybody unpleasant or heard things that would make you not want to work with somebody?
Yes, one famous comic who better be named, he's dead now anyway, who at first day of rehearsal stood up to speak to the cast, and he said, if you look out of that window, you'll see my Rolls Royce out there. I'd like you to know I don't need the money I'm earning in this show, so if you don't do everything exactly as I say, I shall get in that car and drive home. Do you understand? And that was his first meeting with the cast.
Oh, that's going to start the party going really well, isn't it?
Well, yes,
with everyone?
yes, that's true. And there was a famous, well, I can name her, I think, Hilda Baker, who was a brilliant dame, a brilliant comedian, but she was very awkward, an awkward person. And she was doing Panto, and every time she came on stage, she held things up in rehearsals because she wanted things changed or altered or something. And he got to dress rehearsal, and she was doing a song from her TV series, Nearest and Dearest, the title song from that. And the orchestra played the introduction for the song sheet, and she walked on and stopped everything. And the director said, what's the matter, Miss Baker? And she said, the words of that song that have just flown in. He said, yes. She said, they're written on card. He said, yes. She said, I want them written on linen. He said, but what difference will it make? She said, it'll make a bloody big difference, because if they're not written on linen, you've got no star in this show.
My goodness.
So they had to be written on linen. Yes. But there you are.
Did you have any demands over the years?
Oh, yes. I would demand things, and
Did you get
all
them?
the directors would say, "Sod off and learn your script."
You've always seemed very grounded as well. Did you take people under your wing over the years?
Yes. You know, you always think about it because you look at somebody. I've got a very good friend who has recently started playing Dame, and I could give him lots of tips. I see things that perhaps he shouldn't do, or things he should do, but you have to think, look, I don't want to upset him. He's a friend, he's a nice guy, he's going to look at me as some old git telling him what to do. Keep your mouth shut. So it's a fine balance, isn't it? Do you tell them? Do you say that doesn't look good? Try doing it this way, or you have to get around it very carefully if you want to help somebody.
I think though that a lot of people now are quite welcome for the help. As long as it's not too harsh.
Yes. No, it's not got to be harsh, but it's the way, as Frank Carson says, the way you tell it. Yes, you can't tell them too much. You can't study someone and they say, look, that's wrong, and that's wrong, and that's wrong, and you shouldn't be doing that, you should be doing that. You have to creep it in a little bit at a time. Otherwise, they'll get upset, quite rightly. And there's certain things they will disagree with. They'll say, no, I think you're wrong. I think I'm doing it right. And then you have to let them get on with it, So, yes, you have to be careful with people. But it is nice to help people. That's why I like directing. I like directing shows.
Getting the best out of people.
Trying to get the best out of them, yes. Because it's like it's your baby, isn't it? It starts with some words on a bit of paper and it ends up as a production with the audience clapping and laughing, and you think, yeah, that's good.
What would you say is your proudest moment?
You mean apart from talking to you?
Well, thank you.
Right. My proudest moment, I have no idea. I have no idea at all. I think probably the first time I walked onto a big traditional theatre, which I think would have been a King's Theatre Southsea, and you walk on and you look up at rehearsals and you look up at the gods and the circle and the stalls and you think, wow, and you get that butterflies in your tummy, and you think, God, this is going to be full in 10 days' time, and oh my God, and you do the show and they all clap, and if it's a good show they all clap and cheer, and you're proud that you're part of it. Yes, that's good. I don't know if it's my proudest moment, but you do feel proud to be part of a good production.
Did you ever get the Panto blues?
The what?
The Panto blues. It's a phenomena that I've found people have for a good period of time after pantomimes happened.
Oh, the come down.
The Panto blues.
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. Especially when runs were long. Runs that I did like at Newcastle Royal and the Opera House Belfast, that the sort of 12 weeks run, probably 15 weeks with rehearsals. And you're used to doing twice daily or matinees Wednesday and Saturday, whatever it was. And yeah, you come home and it's, oh, I should be putting my makeup on at this time. It's 6:45. God, but you're not. You're going to put the telly on and watch Corrie or something. Yes, you do notice the difference. I should think more so if you had nothing to go on to, if you had no work to go on to, like in the early days. You would come home from Panto and have nothing for a few weeks. And then you get the blues then.
And the bond that you had with people as well, because you must have made some great friends over the years.
Yes, and the problem is your friends are all over the country, because you make friends in Panto, and he's from Edinburgh, and he's from Plymouth, and he's from Bristol, and he's from so you rarely see them. And you keep friends. There's a wonderful dame and impressionist called Adam Day, who is a dear friend of mine. We met in summer season in the early 80s. And we keep in touch by phone. And occasionally I see him, but he lives up in Cheltenham, which is 3 hours drive away from me. So I don't see him and his wife very often. But they're friends. I consider them good friends. So this is the problem, you see. There's not many pros live near me where I am. So I do find that difficult. That's why a lot of the time, it doesn't worry me where I live. I mean, I'm living now in this house on the Isle of Sheppey because I had work here. I'm patron of a charity, and I was presenting music hall here for about 8 years, but I've stopped doing that now. But it wouldn't matter if I were to sell this house, really, where I lived. I've got friends all over the place. I could go and live in Cheltenham or virtually anywhere, go and live in Whitley Bay, because there's people I know up there, but very few that I know here on the island.
Have you ever thought about touring with just you, with your stories?
I do a lot of public speaking about the business and that, but that's all mainly based in Kent. And I did tour, the Frankie Howard play was a one-man play, and I did tour with that. But who knows? I mean, you never know what's going to happen. That's why you never close doors in this business. You might come up with a brilliant idea next week and decide to do it.
I think a lot of people would love to hear your stories.
Well, possibly. I don't know. We'll find out when this podcast goes out and nobody wants to listen to it. You might change your mind.
People will want to listen to it.
When they phone you up and say, "What the hell are you talking to him for? Get somebody decent."
You've shown me here a lovely photograph that I'm going to take a copy of and put it on Facebook and all the other Instagram and Twitters and things like this, of this collection of you and a motley bunch of dames.
Yes, it was taken, I'm guessing, in the 80s for the magazine that is the Sunday magazine in one of the national papers. It was something to do with a charity or something. And they got... it was Vincent Hayes that organised it, who runs Brick Lane Music Hall. And he organised it for them, where they got all these dames. There must be, 30 dames there, into a hotel in London, all posed, and they took this massive photo to put in the magazine. And it must be the only time there's been that many dames photographed together, because obviously Panto dames don't meet, do they?
Not at all. Like ships in the night, aren't you?
That's it. Something like that, anyway. Yes, it was an interesting thing. I think it was in the 80s, I'm not sure, but it's an interesting picture.
We'll try and find more out about that and see if listeners can name everybody as well.
Well, there's a lot of them in there that I know are long gone now. Of course, Chris Biggins is in there. You'll see him. Who else? I think Des King's in there, actually. But a lot of them are gone. I look at the picture sometimes and think, oh dear, yes, he's gone. Hang on, check my pulse, am I here?
Don't say that. Is there anything then left in your career you'd still like to do?
I want to do something. As I say, I'm writing another book. So I enjoy doing that. But yeah, there's bound to be something I'd like to do. Maybe the phone will go and somebody will say, hey, do you fancy doing this? And I might say, God, yeah, I'll do that. So never say no. All the time I'm very healthy and can do things. So who knows? But I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I would like to do. I like talking. It's the only thing I'm any good at is talking. So, yes, I could do some talking. I've written a serious book about how the brain works, and I'd quite like to take lectures out on that. That was published this year. It's called The Secrets of Brain Power.
You're a man of many talents.
Or none, master of none, maybe. I don't know. But yes, so I'd quite like to lecture on that. I do like lecturing. I like talking. So maybe I'll do something else.
Have you ever played Baddie?
On radio, I have. We used to do pantos on radio, and I did play King Rat one year, which I loved. I absolutely adored playing it. But I don't think I've played a baddie. No, even in the early days when I was robber in Babes in the Wood, I was the good robber, not the bad robber.
I don't know, there's something about you that I think could be quite... you could have a devilish streak to you.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe someone will offer it. Say, come and play King Rat somewhere. Who knows? But there you are. We shall see. Or maybe I'm just an evil person. You know?
I don't know. I think there's definitely something there that could be...
Really?
Could be brought out, absolutely. Yeah, I've seen many great baddies, and I've seen Your Dame, and I love Your Dame.
Yes.
But it's always nice to see people trying something new.
Yes. Actually, you're right. It is good to try something new. Don't get in that rut and stay there. You know. So that's why I've done various other things like the Frankie Howard play and the writing. I mean, I started writing for the Two Ronnies TV series many moons ago, way back in the early 80s. So I did that for a while and then dropped it and went back to Panto and Summer Season and so on. Now I'm back to writing again. So it's nice to change things, to do different things, you know.
I never knew that about the Two Ronnies.
Did you not?
No, I didn't.
Why do you think the series is off? I didn't do a lot. I did the odd sketch or two. You used to write a load of sketches and send them off to Ian Davison, who was the script editor, and he'd write back and say, stick 'em. And then occasionally he'd say, oh, yes, I like that one, I'll show it to the boys. And then a contract would turn up or something. But I wasn't on the regular writing team. But I did that, and I did a couple of sketches for 321. You won't remember that.
Oh, I do remember 321, yes.
Yes, I did a couple of sketches for that and did an awful lot for radio. I did funnily enough, I found it the other day and I thought I must put that on the computer so it's not lost. I wrote and presented a programme on speciality acts for Radio 4, BBC 4, which I did from their Manchester studios. And I'd forgotten all about it. It went out, it was well received. And I found the producer had sent me a CD of it years ago and I just chucked it in the cupboard. And I found it only the other day and I thought, I ought to put that on the computer so it's there rather than a CD that I lose or throw away, you know. So someone will listen to it one day.
Do you think you were kind of born in the wrong generation?
Yes, I shouldn't have been born at all. The world would have been happier, wouldn't it? Yes, I've often thought I would have liked, when I read books, I've got a wonderful book on Mari Lloyd and of course John Major's book about his father in the musical days, and I often think I would have liked to have been around then. But then I think, but I'd be dead now, wouldn't I? So maybe not, you know. But it would have been nice. I came in at the end of Variety. I did one date, Hull Continental, a week there as a very young comic. And I was second spot comic, went on and did 12 minutes or something, that was it. And one of the people I worked for, dear old Ted Gatty, who used to be in Variety, he said to me, we used to beg our agent for a week out. You could work 52 weeks a year in Variety, going round. And I thought, I'd like to have tried that instead of 1 week at Hull, you know. Be nice to be going on from Hull to somewhere else and somewhere else, you know. So, I would have quite liked that, I suppose. But I've had a very happy career. I'm not complaining. It's paid for the house and the car and the, you know, and the retirement bits, you know, and so on. So I can't complain, can I? But I will.
Well. So you might be tempted out of kind of retirement.
I never say no. I could be tempted to do something, but who knows? Who knows?
Who knows?
All depends what it is, where it is, when it is, and how much it is.
Of course. Well, this leads me on to my last question.
What's that?
Your dream pantomime. It's a completely made-up scenario where you can
You mean the subject or the people?
No, well, it could be your dream pantomime. So you choose the story.
Yes.
You can choose the cast, alive or dead. You could be in it. You could be sitting in the stalls watching it. You can choose the venue as well.
Gosh. Well, if I were watching it, I would like Jack and the Beanstalk, which is probably my favourite subject. I've only done it, I think, twice or three times, but it's a lovely subject. And I would like Les Dawson to play Dame, because I think he was just wonderful. I would like to see Dorothy Ward play Boy. Now, Dorothy Ward is long gone, but she was a very well-known principal boy. I never saw her. She was retired. Apparently, her last principal boy she played was at the Kingston Empire when she was 60. But she looked wonderful. She kept her figure, had wonderful legs, and was very clever with the makeup, and got away with it beautifully. And was a very well-known principal boy. So I'd like her as principal boy. And I'd like, I don't know, who could we have as girl? We'd have to think of somebody as girl. I can't think of anybody. Probably somebody like Dana, who I thought was very sweet and she would make a nice principal girl. For a baddie, Brian Blessed. Although you'd never shut him up, but he'd be very, very good. And of course, a beautiful line of dancers and at least a 12-piece orchestra. And that would be a sort of a dream panto to watch, wouldn't it?
And the venue?
Oh, it would have to be the Opera House, Belfast. I don't know. They're bringing it back to how it was. It's closed at the moment. But I remember walking in there, especially as I was there in 1970, and it was a dump. And it really was. It was falling down. And then I was there 10 years later, and I walked on the stage, and it was out of this world. It was so beautiful. And the people were so wonderful. The crew were marvellous there. I don't know what's happened to them, but they were marvellous. So it would have to be there.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for taking part in the Panto podcast.
Thank you so much, Hayden. Thank you for asking me. I'm sorry you haven't got anything better to do.